All right, what's going on, guys? This is Rob, and this is our Easter eggs video. Honestly, we haven't done a lot of these like tried and true Easter egg videos, but we're gonna give it a shot. We're gonna see how this goes, see whether or not you guys enjoy it or not. So there were all kinds of Easter eggs and callbacks in this movie, and it was great to see a lot of these little small moments, right? So let's kind of start at the top from the things that we noticed and work our way down to the things that other people noticed that we actually didn't catch that we wanted to incorporate in this video. So the first two are not overly fantastic or crazy or anything like that, but there was a poster for the Rogers musical, and then Delmar's Deli is back, which is kind of a cool little thing. Rogers musical, of course, is a musical that I really wish existed in real life that I would definitely go see. The musical talking about Steve Rogers and like the Avengers and all that kind of stuff. And then Delmar's Deli is a nice little callback because that was a place from Spider-Man Homecoming that apparently had the best sandwiches in town that was ultimately destroyed. And then of course has been rebuilt and now it's back. So that's kind of a cool little thing. But another thing about this are what are basically the Edith glasses. For those of you guys who recall that, the little glasses that were given to Spider-Man by Nick Fury that allowed him to tap into Tony Stark's private network and like his weapons and all that kind of stuff. Of course, those don't work in the movie because of everything going on right now and the fact that Tony Stark's entire network has basically been shut down by the federal government. But then you've also got this crazy thing that like Ned Leeds can use magic. Now this is a reference to the symbiote Spider-Man alien reality storyline when Ned Leeds was the Hobgoblin and was actually a student of Dormammu. So he learned how to use some measure of magic. Whether or not Marvel Studios chooses to do anything with this, I'm not entirely sure, but it was a cool little reference. So that's pulled from the comics. It's not something the Marvel Cinematic Universe just made up off the top of their head. So a cool little tidbit there. Now, Feast also exists in the Marvel Cinematic Universe now, right? The Food Emergency Aid Shelter and Training Facility, and that was actually started by Martin Lee. Now, some of you guys may have heard of Martin Lee, some of you guys may have not heard of Martin Lee. The importance of his character is that Martin Lee was the good guy, but his alter ego was Mr. Negative, and Feast was actually being used by Martin Lee and his henchmen, the Inner Demons, in order to operate a criminal enterprise. Like, it was literally a front. Now, eventually it was shut down after everything that was going on with Martin Lee and all that kind of stuff, and then eventually Aunt May reopened it on her own. But it is cool to see here, because for those of you guys who are familiar with a lot of the kind of information that's been going on out there with Spider-Man No Way Home, that Feast was also a part of the Miles Morales and Spider-Man games for the PS4. But the other reason why this is really cool is because for those of you guys who are familiar with a lot of the information that's going on out there, that Tom Holland has said that there's going to be PS4 related content in this that will lead into bigger things when it comes to the MCU. And that in the PS4 games, you had Feast. And that while Peter Parker had a hand in that, Miles Morales did as well. And that actually leads us to another Easter egg here. One, Miles Morales is never officially name dropped in the movie, but there is a point where Jamie Foxx sees what Andrew Garfield looks like as Spider-Man for the first time in this movie and then believed that he was black and then makes an offhand remark in saying there's got to be a black Spider-Man out there somewhere. So while we don't get a name drop for Miles Morales, it's the second time the MCU has referenced the concept of his character. We know he exists in the MCU because like Donald Glover's character was like, I have a nephew, he lives here, and we know that like that was Uncle Aaron, right? So he's referencing Miles Morales. But it is cool to see another point to the idea that Miles Morales is coming. Now, during the fight scene between Peter Parker and Doctor Strange, there's a point where the cape wraps itself around Peter Parker. Of course, this is a direct reference to the events of What If, where Peter Parker got the cloak of Spider-Man during the Zombies What If episode, but it's also a reference to multiple What If stories where Peter Parker in some variation became a Sorcerer Supreme or something along those lines, or just gained the powers of Doctor Strange. Regardless, it's a nice little Easter egg, kind of a throwback to some of the projects that Marvel's already working on, as well as some of the stories that Marvel's already done. Now, one of the other cool things, if you noticed, is that when all the villains are in the apartment of Happy Hogan, there's actually a really tender moment that's shared between Aunt May and Dr. Octopus. This is a reference to the old Spider-Man comics, where Dr. Octopus had almost married Aunt May. Now, he did this for the purpose of basically stealing an island that she had inherited, but it was a great story, right? Where the two of them kind of had a bit of a romantic connection. That actually goes all the way back to the days of Sinister Six, when Dr. Octopus had kidnapped Aunt May, but had treated her so well, she didn't even know she was being kidnapped in the first place. Now, of course, no romance is going to be brewing between the two because he goes back to his universe and she dies, but it's still a great little thing here in terms of these various characters kind of meeting each other and having a little tender moment that sort of harkens back to the Marvel Comics storylines themselves. Now, one of the other things, and this is something that a lot of you guys called, is that during the Great Big Huge Battle, when you have MJ who's knocked off the scaffolding and she's saved by Spider-Man, the hand you see in terms of it reaching down trying to grab her, that is Tom Holland. That's Tom Holland grabbing her. The funny thing about this is Tom Holland is basically knocked out of the way by the Green Goblin, and ultimately MJ is saved by Andrew Garfield. Now this of course is a reference to the death of Gwen Stacy, played by Emma Stone, in The Amazing Spider-Man. And so it's basically the film giving Andrew Garfield a way to basically make up for what he perceived to be his biggest failure, which was the death of Gwen Stacy. So it's cool. It's basically a little bit of a redemption arc for his character. Now, there is also a moment in the movie, which I don't think a lot of people caught this, when Tobey Maguire makes a kind of comment to Andrew Garfield that like his back hurts, and Andrew Garfield's like, yeah, man, I've got a middle back thing too. He's like, you want me to crack it for you? He's like, yeah, sure. This is a reference to the events, the real world events that happened between Spider-Man 1 and Spider-Man 2 with Tobey Maguire, where he sustained a back injury. And so it's just kind of hitting back to that little tidbit thing there. Plus, like Tobey Maguire's old, right? Old man Tobey, like old Tobey. Like it's cool to see, right? He's just kind of an older guy now, right? Like he's kind of seen some things. He's like a dad, and so on and so forth. It's cool. Right? I think it was kind of a funny little thing, right? He has to have his back cracked, and I thought it was just funny that Andrew Garfield was the one who cracked his back for him. I thought it was a hilarious little thing. And in fact, what I want to do here, because there were a lot of Easter eggs and references here, I want to kind of sidetrack and sort of move into the territory of like Tobey and Andrew and Tom, and kind of talk about all their different little Easter eggs and references and whatnot. So one of the cool little things, I don't know if this is really an Easter egg so much as just an observation, is that the various Spider-Man, right, Andrew, Tom, and Tobey, kind of talk about the different villains they faced off against over the years. The more you like listen to their conversation, the more you realize just how little Andrew Garfield actually did, aside from watching his girlfriend die. Like there just wasn't much for him, right? Like Tobey's like, yeah, man, I fought like a black alien goo substance thing. And like Tom Holland's like, yeah, man, I fought like a giant purple alien. And Andrew's like, I didn't fight any of those. Like I'm just chilled or whatever. It's like that meme where Tom Holland and Tobey are like, hey, Andrew Garfield, do you want to hear a joke? And he's like, yeah. And they're like, trilogy. And he's like, I didn't get it. And they're like, exactly. And he's like, ah, like, I don't know if I'm doing that meme justice, but it's like that, right? It's just, it's really, really cool to see him interacting and how he stands in relation to the other two Spider-Man. But he's also got his benefits. Like one of the funny things that he and Tom Holland share is they don't have organic webs. So they're just like flabbergasted by the fact that like Tobey Maguire has organic webs and they don't. And they're like, do you have any idea how useful that would be? Just those small little things, which are really cool. But another observation / Easter egg that I noticed is that Tom Holland and Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield actually all represent Spider-Man at different points in Spider-Man's life cycle, so to speak. That if you look at the Spider-Man No Way Home film, that they all kind of represent who will become, right? That Tom Holland is the young, naive Spider-Man, right? I mean, he's reckless and doesn't fully grasp the significance of what it is that he's doing, and he's having fun as much as he's like, people could get hurt, but like everything's okay because, we're superheroes, the day's always gonna be saved. And then Andrew Garfield represents the jaded aspect of Tom Holland, which is to say, when Tom Holland basically lost Aunt May, when he was dark and he was angry. In the movie, Andrew Garfield's like, after Gwen Stacy died, I became hardcore. I stopped pulling my punches. Now, of course, that line is a direct Easter egg reference to Superior Spider-Man when Dr. Octopus took over the body of Peter, and then when he fought the Scorpion, he punched his jaw off his face and realized that Peter Parker had actually been holding his punches or pulling his punches all those years and was never fighting his villains with his full strength. Otherwise, he would have beat them to death, right? So that's that little Easter egg going on there. But again, Andrew Garfield represents the darker, jaded side of Peter, and then Tobey represents the version of Peter who kind of has it all figured out. So it's sort of like the three-step process, right? That Tom Holland, he represents himself in the beginning, and then midway through, after the death of Aunt May, he's represented by Andrew Garfield. And then at the end, Tobey represents Tom Holland, which is coming to terms with what it means to really be a superhero and finding balance. So they're not there arbitrarily. I mean, yes, they are there for fan service, right? We were all happy to see them, but they serve as much of a metaphysical role as they do an actual role in the movie. So it was really cool to see that kind of thing play out. Of course, we do also get the meme, right? The Sam Raimi meme that all you guys love so much, right? Well, we get a few of those, right? There's one where Norman Osborn is like, well, I'm something of a scientist myself. And then, of course, you get the comment from Dr. Octopus where it's like the power of the sun in the palm of my hand, right? You get those memes. But then you also get the really, really funny Spider-Man meme from the old 1960s cartoon show with all the Spider-Men pointing at each other, because there's one point where they're all in the lab and Ned Leeds is like, hey, Peter. And like they all look up and they're like, huh, what, Peter? And they're like, what, that Peter? Which Peter? And they're all pointing at each other, right? So you get that great moment, which I'm glad we saw. There was no way John Watts was going to leave that out. But it was a hilarious moment, right? It was one of those things where the little Easter eggs and the little things that you you get are pretty cool, because the final Easter egg that I really want to talk about here is a PS4 Easter egg. And it's one of the things that, again, you had kind of a maneuver that was done by Peter towards the end, which was a PS4 style move, right? A move that you saw Peter do in the PS4 game. But another pull from the PS4 game is Aunt May's Tombstone, that in the game it said, when you help someone, you help everyone. The exact same inscription is written on her tombstone in the film. So, really heavily carrying over the idea of the PS4 franchise. And that's really an important thing here, because I feel like that leads into one of the biggest Easter eggs in the entirety of this movie, which is they're drawing a lot from the PlayStation 4 game. And while I wouldn't say the PlayStation 4 game is going to serve as the entire foundation by which the future Spider-Man movies are made, I would not be surprised if they drew heavily on the PS4 game, right? So the introduction of Miles Morales officially in the Marvel Cinematic Universe comes from his introduction in the PlayStation games. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. There's a lot of similarities there, right? And not even just in terms of just things that exist, right? Like Feast existing, or like Aunt May's Tombstone, but in terms of like the feel of the movie versus the feel of the game, especially when you're at the end, when Peter fully becomes Spider-Man, goes forward, does his own thing with the world not knowing his real identity. It's cool. But that's our video for Easter eggs. Let us know what you guys think down in the comment section. If there's any that we missed, any you think that we should have talked about. And yeah, thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you all later. Peace.